You're watching StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh, Revi, and joining us from London is Laurence Broers. He's the Caucasus Program Director at the London-based peacebuilding organization Conciliation Resources, and has more than 20 years' experience as a researcher of conflicts in the South Caucasus. Dr. Broers, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
The latest clashes, Dr. Broers, between Armenia and Azerbaijan over the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region, they're extremely serious. They seem to have intensified in recent months. Mid-July, I think over 17 people, including the highest-ranking general from the Azeri side, had been killed. In hindsight, do you see those clashes as a warning of the danger of it recurring?
Yes, but I think this warning has been with us for longer than simply since July. There is a longer-term trend, particularly since 2014, I would say. In 2016, if you recall, there was a 4-day war in which more than 200 people were killed. And since then, what we've seen, I think, is a new kind of crisis in the peace process. In early 2019, the foreign ministers reportedly agreed on the need to prepare their populations for peace, but nothing tangible followed on from that. Since then, we've had a lot of symbolic controversy between the sides. Moves and steps have been taken, almost guaranteed, to aggravate the situation. We've got a world community that is distracted with the coronavirus pandemic, the increased role of local regional powers, and a sense that, yes, now is the time to perhaps change facts on the ground in advance of the domestic consequences of the pandemic. So that's how I would read the situation.
So, Dr. Broers, would you say that then this is, in all likelihood, a very response to what happened in July to try and change the situation on the ground?
Well, yes. I mean, it's inevitable with these escalations that each side blames the other and presents its actions as defensive. Looking at what's happening today, it looks quite similar in a number of respects to the April 2016 escalation, which was an operation by Azerbaijani forces to recoup positions along the line of contact around the contested territory of Nagorno-Karabakh. And today does look like that. It could, to a considerable extent, be seen as a response to the escalation in July. That was in a different part of the geography of the two states in the international border. Yes, as you said, heavy losses suffered by Azerbaijan in July. This is, in a sense, perhaps a response to that. And I think we should remember that with the 4-day war in April 2016, that was framed very much as Azerbaijan turning the tide, recouping a military advantage after heavy investment in its defense sector. And there's a need to keep that narrative up. And let's also not forget that, recouping occupied territories is a key unifying agenda in Azerbaijan. This is a popular policy.
Like you're pointing out, even in July, post the Azeri general being killed, being one of those 17, I think, civilians who were also killed, there was a huge uprising in Baku.
Yes, I wouldn't call it an uprising as such.
Yeah, of course.
It was a spontaneous protest. A spontaneous protest that really was quite unprecedented. I think that's true. There have been occasional small-scale protests in Azerbaijan in recent years, but protests in support of the army and in support of recovering occupied territories around Nagorno-Karabakh, and Karabakh itself, of course, is also seen as occupied in Azerbaijan, is something that is very difficult for the government to repress and put back into the box. And I think once that genie has come out, it's very difficult to put back. So yes, I think we do see a kind of a government intent to harness some of that enthusiasm coming from the Azerbaijani street for military action.
And is it worrying, the military action, the extent of it, the arms that are being used, or at least the reports that are coming out, artillery, the air raid sirens that have been reported as well, the government announcing what, martial law and total mobilization in Azerbaijan as well?
No, absolutely. This is extremely concerning. Both countries have gone through a process of rearmament over the last 15 years, and they have highly sophisticated military hardware. They can strike at targets deep inside each other's territory. So there really is the prospect of a full-scale war. So it's a very, very dangerous situation. I think the best that one could hope for is that this would be contained as a 4 or 5 day war. The risk, however, the danger is that it would extend longer than that. And then if one side appears to be losing, then I think you get into very, very dangerous territory where outside powers might intervene, and we have a broader conflagration.
Just picking up on that last point of yours, explain to us now, the Turkish President Erdogan has spoken to the Azerbaijan counterpart. He's again used those words of one nation, two states, and that they would support the Azerbaijan government and the people in any manner, so to speaking. So if we just take Turkey first and then go on to the other regional and global powers, what is the role of Turkey and how dangerous can it get if, like you're saying, one of the sides, in this case the Azeris, lose?
Yes, I think one of the distinguishing features of this escalation, and likewise in July, is Turkey's more visible role. Turkish support for Azerbaijan is not new. That was also present in April 2016. But I think what we've seen since then is that Turkey has a lot of recent battle experience in a number of different theaters in the Middle East, in North Africa. It also has a defense industry. Developing that defense industry is a key objective for Turkey's leader, Erdogan. And his particular brand of nationalism, I think, also benefits. This is shoring up his domestic legitimacy by coming to the assistance of a fellow Turkic nation in a conflict, of course, with Armenia, with whom Turkey has a very conflicted historical relationship. So there have been a lot of reports circulating online that Turkish drone technology is in use. There have also been reports of pro-Turkish mercenaries, militias coming from Syria. Yes, and it's of course impossible to confirm these for now, but it seems to me that there may be a trend of the use of force short of war, the use of capability where there is still a degree of plausible deniability. And through this, Turkey is supporting Azerbaijan and recalibrating the calculus against war. Azerbaijan has traditionally been on its own, confronting Armenia backed by Russia in a very asymmetric kind of context. And Turkey's increased involvement, I think, is undermining that and changing the calculus for war.
And Turkey and Russia have a very peculiar and complex relationship together and against each other in various theaters across the globe. And here, again, it seems like that's one.
Absolutely. The Turkish-Russian relationship is one of the most complex. They are on some parameters strategic partners. They are on other parameters in other theaters, rival powers. Yes, I think Turkey's increased involvement in the conflict is a challenge to Russia's perceived role as the security guarantor for Armenia and the arbiter of peace. Moscow sees itself as the first among equals within the Minsk group that is mediating in this conflict. And I think what we're going to see is a real test of Russian capacities. If, as this conflict unfolds over the next couple of days, will Russia be able to enforce a ceasefire after 3 or 4 days, as it has in the past? So I wouldn't expect Russian and Turkish forces to, engage in open conflict for the two powers to really want to become embroiled in that way. But yes, this is a new dynamic, and I think Russia's reputation, in a way, it starts to be put on the line as the enforcer of peace in this conflict.
Well, the Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has also been working the lines, diplomatic telephone lines. But like you pointed out, the Azeris accuse the Russians of again, it's slightly complex there, right? Of being a strategic ally of Armenia, of having a base there, providing arms, but the Russians are doing that with the Azerbaijan forces as well.
Yes, Azerbaijan has been developing a close relationship with Russia. They are strategic partners in a sense and on a number of different initiatives. In that way, I think Azerbaijan is seeking to to undermine that alliance and to demonstrate to Russia that maybe it has more benefits from allying itself and being more sympathetic to the Azerbaijani position in this conflict. But I think we have to remember that the main point of leverage in the South Caucasus for Russia is this conflict, and I think Moscow is very much aware of that. Russia is also the only outside power that has treaty obligations in the event of a full-scale war affecting Armenia's territory, and so it is really probably the external stakeholder with the greatest stake in preventing a large-scale conflict. So I would expect its policy to continue to seek to prevent that outcome.
And if hostilities or even the threat of hostilities continue for long, do you see it threatening the disruption of infrastructure, of oil pipelines, whether it's coming from Russia to the region, to the Caucasus, or from the Caspian through Azerbaijan to Europe?
I mean, I think that could happen in the event of a protracted conflict that extends beyond, a 4 or 5 day war. I think that what we will see in the coming days is a lot of commentary that this conflict is about geopolitics. It's about energy security. It's about blocking Azerbaijani gas and oil exports and so on. I think we need to remain focused on the domestic factors, on the national level factors that are driving this escalation. I think those are the key, rather than the broader kind of energy infrastructure and pipeline politics.
You've often referred to it as lazy analysis, but when you talk about the international group, the OSCE, the Minsk group, and you mentioned Russia seeing itself as first among equals there, how do you see them? NATO has issued a statement. The OSCE has also issued a statement asking for an immediate ceasefire. But beyond these statements, how do you see them prevailing on calming the situation on the ground?
Well, I mean, it pains me to say this, but I think we're really in a crisis in terms of multilateral diplomacy. The OSCE is currently going through a leadership crisis with a number of posts that have not been filled. The OSCE operates according to consensus, and the parties have actively worked to limit and to curtail its influence. I think what happened after this putative agreement to prepare populations for peace, the Minsk group stepped back and tried to give more space to the national leaderships, who then didn't fill that slogan with any content. So I think what we would need in order to prevent further escalation and to move the resolution of the conflict forward would be much more concentrated international attention. But I don't really see how that's going to happen. The world is distracted. There's a pandemic, US elections, and beyond that, the breakdown of the unipolar hegemonic order led by the United States and Euro-Atlantic powers. We're in a much more fractured, multipolar world in which coordinating international influence on a conflict like this, an obscure conflict, is that much harder. So unfortunately, I think there are limits to what outside powers can do. But I think this is also, again, for the umpteenth time, a wake-up call that more action is needed.
And wake-up call is often referred to as Europe's longest conflict. I know it's a difficult ask, but simply put, can you condense the history of what's happened here from 1988, especially when that conflict killed hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people?
Yes. Well, I mean, for the roots of the conflict, you have to go back to, the early days of the Soviet Union, when different territories were being allocated amongst the constituent union republics of the Soviet Union. An Armenian majority territory was included in Azerbaijan, and that was contested throughout the Soviet period. When Mikhail Gorbachev declared perestroika and that, within the Soviet Union, old issues could be reopened, the Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh began a campaign to unify with Armenia. And that led, as you mentioned, to a large-scale conflict that went on for 6 years. It killed more than 25,000 people. And it ended in a decisive Armenian military victory. But since then, oil-rich Azerbaijan has rearmed and wants to recoup its occupied territories through force or through other means. There is deep frustration with the mediation process, and I think that's what's brought us to where we are today.
Dr. Laurence Broers, putting that in a nutshell, it was extremely difficult, but it was extremely, thank you for your insight and your experience on the show.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Thank you.
And do log on to our website to get all the latest news and analysis from an Indian perspective. And you can send us your feedback on our various social media handles, as well as support our kind of journalism. You're watching StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh Revi.